All right, so we have one question, and it really applies to both Sunday morning and Sunday night because I'm currently teaching 1 Corinthians on Sunday morning and Romans on Sunday night. And the question is essentially this. The person's just wondering why the selection of so much Pauline material, why Paul's letters play such a prominent role in the teaching. Some of that's just where we are right now. Sunday nights I did Old Testament for 50 weeks. We talked through the biggest events of the Old Testament. And then I went from that to this Pauline epistle of Romans. On Sunday mornings, we're in 1 Corinthians right now, and I've been there for a while, but prior to that, I had done the life of Christ, the 50 biggest events of the New Testament, primarily focused on the life of Christ. We taught through the Gospel of John and the prologue, the Great I Ams, and taught through the Sermon on the Mount. Also on Sunday mornings, I've worked in some Old Testament things, just like Sunday nights, of Jeremiah and Isaiah and the book of Daniel. And so really, I think if you've been coming on Sunday nights for a while and we've been in Romans, it's because that's just where we've been. And I do line by line, verse by verse. I think having things in context is really important. Building on themes from one week to the next is very important. I feel like the scripture, even individual letters within Paul, covers so much of what we need to know as believers that's going on there. But the reality is when the book of Romans is over, I'll go back and do something probably Old Testament theme-wise. I may do a short topical study on Sunday nights. And so we kind of cycle through things, but I like to finish them. I like to start them and finish them. So the reason for so much Pauline stuff is just we're in the middle of Romans, and some people may have been wondering why so much Old Testament stuff. When I did the 50 events, the 50 most important events of the Old Testament, we did an Old Testament survey. Spent a whole year doing that. So some of it's just the time and season where we are. One other thing I would say, though, is that Paul wrote letters to churches. And because of that, pastors are going to be inclined to teach Pauline letters because they're pastors of churches. So as Paul wrote to churches with relevant encouragement for the church, pastors read it and say, what should I teach my church? And I think that's some of it too, is that the letters written to churches are easiest for pastors to teach to churches because the material is directed at the church. And so some of the reason for the heavy Pauline emphasis has been that. But like I said, we've done, I think in fact on Sunday nights after Romans is over, we're going to do one topical thing, and then I will probably launch into a study back in the life of Christ. In fact, what I probably will do is redo the Sermon on the Mount, because it's been 7 years since I've done that on Sunday mornings. So I may launch back into the Sermon on the Mount on Sunday nights. But anyway, that's a good question. And the short answer is just that's where we are. And I like to finish whatever material we're in because I don't have to reset up the context and the background and the verses before and right after. And also, if other people cover for me, they can just teach the next verse. So it helps to stay in a text. That way, whoever's filling in for me knows exactly what the next verse is and can start preparing weeks in advance. There's just a lot of benefits to staying within the context of a particular book and working that out until you finish it, and then move on to something else. When I do shift from one book to the next, I try to change though quite a bit. And we even did the churches in Revelation, the first 2 or 3, 4 chapters of that, and then with one other chapter of Revelation in there. So we mix them in like that, but it just takes a long time when you pick a long book like 1 Corinthians and Romans. It just takes a while, and I think that's probably more the issue in terms of how long we've been in Pauline epistles. It's just I picked 2 really long books. So, but those are good. That's a good question. And so preaching wise, teaching wise, I'm pretty purposeful. I try to do a Pauline epistle, a life of Christ, and teachings from the New Testament and Old Testament study. I try to cycle through them like that, and that way we try to cover a variety of material and cover them across the whole spectrum of the New and Old Testament, various genres of writings, and also some of it's educational. Do you understand, and do I understand all the events of the Old Testament and how they fit together, and then get to the New Testament and how those fit together. And so I really kind of have a plan in that regard of trying to mix material in, but with the big picture in mind the whole time. And so Romans actually, with just really 4 teaching chapters left, 13, 14, 15, and 16, but really only 3 teaching chapters left because chapter 16 only has a few verses that are doctrinal. Because of that, I suspect the book of Romans, we will only be in that for the remainder of this year. After that, we will be on to other material. So if you're coming on Sunday nights, that will change. On Sunday mornings, 1 Corinthians, I expect also probably through the end of the year. Then we'll take a break and do some other things and then come back to 2 Corinthians later. All right, good question. We'll see you guys this week.